Hello, my dear students. A very warm welcome to all of you in Shri Jayendra Rank Zone. I am your friend and mentor for the subject Business Economics. In this lecture, we'll begin with Chapter 3, that is Theory of Production and Cost, and in particular, we'll begin with Unit 1, that is Theory of Production. All the following concepts will be covered in the coming series of lectures. So let's begin. This is lecture number 1 and we are beginning with unit 1, that is theory of production. Let us see the learning objectives of this chapter. At the end of this unit, you will be able to define production and describe the production function. So we'll be able to understand the meaning of production and production function. Describe the characteristics of various factors of production. Distinguish between short run and long run production function. Illustrate the law of diminishing returns and returns to scale. We'll try to describe the production optimization using iso-Cohen's and iso-cost curves. Let us see a quick overview of this chapter. So this is the content that we are going to cover. In production part, factors of production, we have land, labor, capital and entrepreneur. The return of land is known as rent. The return of labor is known as wages. The return of capital is known as interest. And the return of entrepreneur is known as profits. My dear students, you should understand that the return of rent, so the nature of reward is fixed over here. The nature of reward in case of interest is also fixed. The nature of wages is also fixed, but the nature of profit is not fixed. Over here, the nature of return is variable. I believe you understood. So in case of production, we need to understand the meaning of production optimization, and then we'll shift to production function. Short run production function, law of variable proportions, and we'll see long run production function, returns to a scale, economies and diseconomies of scale. Economies means benefits. So we need to understand over here benefits of economies of scale, that is benefits of large scale production, and limitations of large scale production. Okay, let us see the cost part now. So in cost part, we need to understand all the concepts which relates to cost. Then we'll move to short run cost and long run cost. In short run and long run, we have fixed cost and variable cost, and in between fixed and variable, we have certain types of cost which are neither fixed nor variable, or which are having a combination of fixed and variable, and which is known as semi-variable cost. I think we are clear till here. Let us see the meaning of production now. Meaning of production. Students, you should understand what is production. So basically, if I tell you production is basically the production is an organized activity of transforming resources into finished goods. And if I talk about resources, that could be raw material, right? And in case of finished goods, that could be either goods and services. What is the objective? The objective of production is to satisfy the demand of transformed resources. I believe you understood. Just make a noting over here. Production is an organized activity of transforming resources into finished goods and services. And the objective of production is to satisfy the objective of production is to satisfy the demand of such resources or transformed resources. I hope you are clear. Let's read the text. So production is very important economic activity. Economic activity, an activity which is done for money, an activity which is done for money. You can measure it into a monetary terms. Measurement is possible in monetary term. Measurement is possible in monetary terms. In monetary terms. Let's continue. As we are aware, the survival of a firm in a competitive market depends upon the ability to produce goods and services at a competitive cost. One of the principal concerns of business managers is to achievement of optimum efficiency in production by minimizing the cost of production. The performance of an economy is judged by the level of production at which level the firm is doing the production. The amount of goods and services an economy is able to produce determines the richness or poverty of the economy. In fact, the standard of living of people depends on the volume and variety of goods and services produced in the country. In US, thus the USA is a rich country because the level of production is high, and Ghana is a poor country because the level of production is low. Ghana is a poor country because the level of production is low. Level of production is low. I hope you are clear. So in economics, what is the role of production? So basically, production is an economic activity, you can say, which is directed at a satisfaction of human wants. What is production? So production is creation of utility. What is creation of want? That is satisfying goods and services. Okay, let us continue. In common parlance, the term production is used to indicate the activity of making something material. The growing of wheat, rice, any other agricultural crop by farmers, and manufacturing of cement, radio sets, wool, machinery, or any other industrial product is often referred as production. What exactly do we mean by the production in economics? Economics is the word production is used as a wider sense to denote the process of which man utilizes the resources such as men, material, capital, time, working upon them to transfer them into the commodities and services, so to make them satisfy what? Human wants. In other words, production is any economic activity which converts inputs into outputs, which is capable of satisfying human wants, whether it is making material goods or providing a services. It is included in the production. It satisfied the wants of some people. Therefore, we can say that in economics, activities such as making of cloth by industrial worker, services of a retailer who delivers it to the consumer, doctor, lawyer, teacher, actor, dancer is production. Let us write some notes about production. Just write production. Production is any economic activity which is directed at the satisfaction of human wants. We should understand what is production. So basically, production means creation of utility. That is creation of want. Satisfying goods and services. We can say that it is satisfying goods and services. Production means creation or value addition, addition of value in the form of goods and services, that is products. Let us see some examples. Production of a car by a manufacturer. Selling of vegetables by a vendor. Etc. So students, if we try to understand them, if we try to understand how the creation of utility is happen, that means types of utilities. So production consists of various processes to add utility to natural resources for gaining greater satisfaction by them. The first is changing the form, which is known as form utility. If we change the form of a resource, it becomes more usable. This is known as form utility. So changing the form of natural resources. Most manufacturing processes consist of use of physical inputs such as raw materials and transforming them into physical products possessing what? Possessing utility, which could be measured in terms of utils. Example, changing the form of a log of wood into a table or changing the form of iron into a machine. See, iron in isolation don't have such utility, but when we transform iron into machine, the utility of machine or the utility of iron has increased a lot. This may be called conferring utility into a form, and this is known as form utility. So basically it refers to physically changing the form of natural resources. We can write over here. physically changing the form of natural resources so it would be used properly. The next concept is changing the place, which is known as place utility. Place utility. So changing the place of a resource from a place where they are little or of no use to another place where they are of greater use. The utility of place can be obtained by certain factors. Number one, extraction from earth, that is removal of coal. See, if coal is there in the earth, inside the earth, it is of no use. When we remove the coal from the earth, minerals, gold, and other metals from mines and supplying them to market, the usefulness of that product will improve. So transferring goods from where they give a little or no satisfaction to a place where the utility has increased. Example, tin in Malaysia is of little use until it is brought to the industrialized centers where necessary machinery and technology are available to produce metal boxes for packaging. Another example is apples in Kashmir orchards have a little utility for farmers, but when the apples are transported to markets where human settlements are thick and crowded like city centers, they afford more satisfaction and a greater number of people. These examples emphasize the additional utility conferred on goods by all forms of transportation system, by transport worker, by the agents who assist in the movement of marketing of goods. I believe you must have understood the place utility concept. So we can say that changing the place of resource from they are of little use to another place where they are of greater use is called place utility. I believe it is clear. Let's continue with the third factor, and that talks about time. That means time utility. The third utility is time utility. So making available materials at times where they are not normally available. Examples, harvested food grains are stored for use till the next harvest. Canning of seasonal fruits is undertaken to make them available during off seasons, and this may called conferring of utility of time. We can write here that time utility is created by making goods and services available, goods and services available at times when they are not normally available, at times when they are not normally available. The next is personal skills. So personal utility, it is personal utility that talks about making use of personal skills in the form of services. Example, those of organizers, merchants, transport workers, etc. So you can write over here, personal utility involves making use of personal skills, making use of personal skills in the form of services. In the form of services. Clear? Let's read the text. The fundamental purpose of all the activities is the same, namely to create utility in some manner. Thus, production is nothing but creation of utilities in the form of a good or service. The example is given over here. In the production of woolen suit, utility is created in some form or the other. Firstly, wool is changed into woolen cloth at the spinning or weaving mill, that is utility created by changing the form of a wool, and then it is taken to a place where it is to be sold, that is utility added by transporting the product, changing the place utility, changing the place. Since woolen clothes are used only in winters, they will be retained until the time when they are required by the purchaser, time utility. So production can be done in the month of May or June in India, but it could be used in the month of November and December when woolen clothes are actually required. In the whole process, the services of various groups of people are utilized, like mill worker, shopkeeper, agents, to contribute to the enhancement of utility, all types of utility, and thus the entire process of production is nothing but creation of form utility, place utility, and personal utility, as well as time utility. I believe it is clear to all. Let us move ahead. It should be noted that the production process need not necessarily involve conversion of physical inputs into a physical output. So it is not required. But it could happen. For example, production of services, that is such as those of lawyers, services of doctors, musicians, consultants, involves intangible inputs to produce intangible output. But the production does not include work done within a household by anyone out of love and affection. Voluntary services of goods produced for self consumption and intention to exchange in the market is an essential component of production. So it should create some value in the market. Creation of some monetary value in the market. Just continue. The money expenses incurred in the production of process of production, that is transforming the resources into finished goods, constitute the cost of production. Although cost of production is not taken into account for the pure production analysis, it is extremely important, vital matter for any business decision making. Nevertheless, the theory of production, we would confine ourselves to laws of production, production function, method of production optimization, etc. However, it is necessary to remember over here that a production decision cannot depend merely on physical productivity based on operating efficiency alone. The profitability of a productive activity would depend upon the revenue realized from the output and the cost incurred in raising that output. Aspect of cost and revenue will be discussed in the following units. Let us begin. I believe all of you must have understood the concept of utility now, that is time utility, place utility, personal utility, and form utility. That relates to the theory of production. So over here we have covered this, the concept of production and the concept of utility attached to the production very well. And now we are shifting to our second concept that talks about the factors of production. So students, basically there are four types of factors of production. We have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. These are the four types of factors of production. For the land, the incentive or reward is rent. For the labor, the incentive or reward is wages. For capital, the incentive or reward is interest on capital. And for enterprise, it is profit. You should understand over here the reward of rent, wages, interest that we get from land, labor, and capital is fixed reward. Their nature is fixed. But if I talk about the nature of reward, that is enterprise reward, that is profit, the nature is variable. That means what? The profit can go up and down at any point of time, or it changes between time to time. I believe you understood this. Let us read the text now. So factor of production refer to inputs. An input is a good or services which a firm buys for use in the production process. Production process requires a wide variety of inputs depending on the nature of output. The process of producing goods in a modern economy is very complex. A good has to pass through many stages of production or many processes and many hands until it reaches to consumer's hand, that is in a finished form. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial ability are the four factors of resources which make it possible to produce goods and services. Even a small piece of bread cannot be produced without an active participation of these production processes or these factors of production. While land is a free gift of nature, it refers to natural resources. The human endeavor is classified functionally and qualitatively into three components: labor, the men who actually works. We have capital, that is finance, and entrepreneurial skills, entrepreneur. So entrepreneurial skills is possessed by a person known as entrepreneur who is having an idea. Let us continue. So these are the four factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. As I told you, the reward for land is rent, and rent is fixed. The reward of capital is interest on capital. This is also a fixed reward. The reward for land is rent, and this is a fixed reward. Over here, the reward for labor is not rent. The reward for labor is wages. The reward for entrepreneur is profits, the whole and sole return, and this is not fixed. This is a variable reward. Variable reward. I believe you understood. Let us continue. The first term, that is land. Land. So all of you know that land is a non-depreciable asset. The term land is used in a very special sense in economics. It does not mean soil or earth surface alone, but refers to all the free gifts of nature which could be included beside land in common parlance, in common understanding. We have natural resources, fertility of soil, water, air, light, heat, natural vegetation, etc. Everything is considered as land. My dear students, I believe you understand that land lacks mobility. Land lacks mobility. That means what? That land is immobile. You can't transfer a piece of land in geographical sense. It cannot be shifted from one place to another place. Land is a specific factor of production in the sense that it does not yield any result unless human efforts are employed. So if you put a land in isolation and you don't do anything, nothing would happen to that land. It is a non-depreciable asset, I understand that. But you should understand over here that you know, no development will happen automatically on the land. There would be no construction will happen, no growth will happen over that land if you don't touch that land, if you don't improve the fertility of that land. So it becomes difficult at times to state precisely as to what part of a given factor is due solely as gift of nature and what part belongs to human effort made on this part. Therefore, as a theoretical concept, we can say that the following characteristics which would qualify a given factor is called land. The first factor is land is a free gift of nature. It's a free gift of nature. No human effort is required for making land. It has no supply price in the sense that no payment has been made to Mother Nature for obtaining the land from her. Point number two, supply of land is fixed. You cannot improve land on earth. Whatever land is available on earth is fixed. It is not going to increase. So land is strictly limited in quantity. It is limited. A lot of opportunity cost is involved with the land. It is different from other factor of production in that no change in demand can affect the amount of land in existence. In other words, the total land supply is perfectly inelastic from the point of view of economy. However, it is relatively elastic from the point of view of the firm. I believe you understood. Third, land is a permanent and has indestructible powers. That means what? That originally you can't destroy land. The production power of soil is indestructible since its fertility can be restored even if it gets depleted after a certain period of time, after a certain use. I believe you understood. Let's read it. So land is permanent in nature and cannot be destroyed. According to Ricardo, land has a certain original and indestructible powers, and these properties of land cannot be destroyed at all. Land is a passive factor. It is a passive factor. That means what? Land is not an active factor. Unless human effort is existence exercised on land, it does not produce anything by its own. That means what? That you have to work on land to increase its fertility. It's not happen that the idle piece of land will generate crop automatically. This will not happen. An idle piece of land will not generate any crop automatically. So human effort is required. Land is immobile. You can't transfer. You can't transfer. No transfer of land is possible. No transfer of land is possible. You can't transfer, you can't geographically transfer the land from place 1 to place 2. It is in the geographical sense, land cannot be shifted physically from one place to another. The natural factor typical to given place cannot be shifted to other places. Land has multiple users. That means what? Can be used for varied purposes through the suitability in all the uses is not the same. land is heterogeneous. That means what? No two pieces of land is same or alike. They differ in fertility and situation. The situation of two different land is different, and accordingly it should be dealt with. I believe you understood till here. Let's continue and see another concept, and that is labor, the second factor of production. Labor. So labor over here means human efforts. Human efforts. The term labor means any mental or physical exertion directed to production of what? Either goods or services. All human efforts of body or of mind undergone, partly or wholly, with a view to secure an income apart from the pleasure derived directly from the work is termed as labor. In other words, it refers to various types of human efforts which require the use of physical exertion, physical power, skills, intellectual skills. It is, however, difficult to say that in any human effort all the three are not required. The proportion of might vary. That means what? Labor, to have an economic significance, must be one which is done with the motive of some economic reward, and the reward of labor is wages. Wages is the reward for labor. Anything done out of love and affection is not labor, although it is very useful in increasing human well-being. It is not labor. Why? Because in economic sense over here, we are talking about the term labor. Economic sense, financial sense. It implies that any work done for the sake of pleasure or love does not represent labor in economics. It is for this reason that services of a housewife are not treated as labor, because she works in her house because of love and affection of the family, while those of maid servant are treated as labor because she or he don't work for the love and affection. She works over here, it's her job to work, and that is why there is some economic value. It is not because of love and affection with the family. So if a person sings just for the sake of his or her pleasure, it is not considered as labor despite the exertion involved in it. You should understand over here that financial term or fee or reward, wages, is very important in terms of labor. On the other hand, if a person sings against a payment of certain fee, then this activity involves labor. Let us see the characteristics of labor. The very first characteristics of labor is human effort. Is human effort. So over here we can say that labor involves human effort with a view to gain some economic reward. So human and psychological considerations come up in this context of labor. Let us see the text. So labor as compared to other factors is different. It is connected with human effort with others and not directly connected with human effort. As a result, there are certain human and psychological considerations which may come up unlike in the case of other factors. Therefore, leisure, free treatment, favorable work environment are essential for laborers. Favorable work environment is essential for laborers. Just read it over, just write along with me. Labor involves human efforts with a view to gain an economic reward. So, human and psychological considerations come up in the context of labor. I believe you understood. Let us continue. Labor is perishable. That means what? Labor can't be stored. Labor or energy, labor or work to be done by laborer by an employee can't be stored. Labor involves human exertion, but it is perishable in nature. That means what? Since a day labor lost cannot be completely recovered subsequently. Whatever is lost in a day cannot be recovered wholly by extra work done on the following day. You should understand over here that if you work over here, if you work for extra a day, but the time is different, the date is different. So you can't store the labor. It is highly perishable in nature, right? So a laborer cannot be stored in his labor and for use at a later point of time. We can say that labor is said to have no reserve price. Just read the text. So labor is highly perishable in nature in a sense that the day's labor lost cannot be completely recovered by the extra work done in any another day. In some words, laborer cannot store his labor. Labor is said to have no reserve price. You can't store reserve or reserve labor. The third is labor is an active factor. That means what? Without the active preparation or participation of labor, land and capital may not produce anything. So labor's participation is very crucial and it is very important. So labor is an active factor. Labor is the one who works on that land. So actual working of labor is required. Actual working of labor is required. Labor is inseparable from the laborer. That means what? You cannot separate uh, you cannot separate the labor, the part of labor from the laborer, from the person. A laborer is the source of his own labor part. Supposingly a person is there in India. That means what? He will provide services in India, the physical services. He cannot provide the physical services to US. Because if he wants to provide the physical services to US, actually he wants to work in a factory. In that case, he should be present in US. But this is not the case. So when the laborer sells his or her service, he has to be physically present where they are delivering the services. I'm not talking about online world. The laborer sells the labor against the wages, but remains the capacity to work. So the capacity to work remains with the laborer. Whenever the person will go, whenever the labor will go, their capacity to work will actually moves along with the laborer. I believe you understood. Next point is labor power differs from laborer to laborer. That means what? That some laborer is skilled, some laborer is unskilled, some laborer is semi-skilled. Their power to work, their brain works in a different manner. So it is not homogeneous. Labor is heterogeneous. They all are different in the sense that labor power differ from person to person. Labor power or efficiency of a labor depends upon the inheritance and acquired qualities, the trainings undertaken, characteristics of work environment, and incentive to work. It may happen that if you give extra incentive to the laborer, he actually performs better. Let's see the next point, that is the sixth one. All labor may not be productive. It could happen that all labor could not be productive. That means what? That all efforts are not sure to produce resources. Wastage of resource could happen. Wastage of resource is possible. Labor has poor bargaining power. Let us try to understand this point. So labor has a weak bargaining power. Labor has no reserve price, as I explained you in the beginning. That since laborer cannot be stored, the laborer is compelled to work at the wages offered by the employer at the end of the day or at the end of his time. For this reason, when compared to employers, laborers have poor bargaining power and can be exploited and forced to accept lower wages if there is no demand of laborer in the market or there is less demand of laborer in the market. You can say that the laborer is economically weak while the employer is economically powerful in the society. Although things have changed these days a lot in favor of labor since from 20th and 21st century. Labor is mobile. That means what? Labor can shift from one place to another place. If labor wants, he can give him services from country A to country B. He can shift from India to Japan, Japan to China, China to US, anywhere in the world. So, labor is mobile. It is not as of land that the land is immobile, but the labor is mobile. Labor is a mobile factor, moving factor. Apparently, workers can move from one job to another or from one place to another. However, we can say that in reality, there are many obstacles in the way of free movement of labor from job to job or from place to place. Let us see the ninth point. There is no rapid adjustment of supply of labor to the demand for it. The total supply of labor cannot be increased or decreased instantly. It takes a lot of time. It is not possible to produce a lot of labor, right? So choice between the hours of labor and hours of leisure. Students, what happens when we increase the wages of labor? Generally, they choose to have leisure time more. A laborer can make a choice between the hour of labor and hour of leisure. The feature gives rise to a peculiar backward bending shape to the supply curve of labor. The supply of labor and the wage is directly related. It implies that as a wage rate increases in the market, the laborer tends to increase the supply of labor by reducing the hours of leisure. However, beyond a certain desired level of income, the laborer want leisure and they don't want to do a lot of labor. So over here increases the hours of leisure in response to further rise in the wage rate. So that is perhaps to have more rest and leisure than earning money. I believe you understood till here. Before we move ahead, let us write something about it. Just write generally supply of labor and wage rate are directly related as a general law of supply. So we can say that as wage rate increases, the laborer tends to increase the supply, of labor by reducing the hours of leisure. Okay, so students, I believe you must have understood till over here. So we have covered in today's class what we have covered today in today's class. So we have covered the meaning of production. We have covered the creation of utility and factor of production. In particular, we have covered land and labor. The capital part and enterprise part is still pending. We'll continue in the next class. Thank you.